When a California wildfire sweeps down toward a city, an evacuation begins in panic.
You gotta get the horses out.
Ladies and gentlemen, please leave this area. Leave it now.
Where is the fire department? Why don't they do something?
Quickest decisions, of course, that you've got to make is, where is this thing going? It's controlled by the wind.
As an Australian bushfire blows into the suburbs, there's little time to escape.
We knew that the fire was coming for us. Whether we'd simply clicked into a different level of survival, we really don't know.
And when a mountain forest fire roars down towards a vacation camp, even firefighters are in peril.
And I looked at this Forest Service guy who had 20 years of experience say, I've never seen anything like this. And that's when, for the first time, fear entered my mind.
The life-threatening rampage of a super fire, nature at its fiercest. A curtain of flame races across a windswept wilderness, part of nature's cycle of death and rebirth. In the wild, this blaze can build into a super fire, spreading with ferocious speed. And when it sweeps toward areas of human habitation, all we possess is in peril.
Let's start it.
Few places on Earth are more combustible than southern coastal California. The beautiful vegetation is fuel for fire, the ocean breeze, a bellows. In the mountains above the city of Santa Barbara, the danger reaches epic levels in June of 1990. A heat wave has sizzled up from Mexico in the 5th year of a withering drought. Wildfires are breaking out all over the region. Fire crews are working round the clock to prevent catastrophe. Wildfire expert Scott Franklin and his son Tom, a fire captain, are among the many firefighters on call in the tinder-dry hills.
It was one of those days where firefighters just kind of sit around and you kind of wait for something to happen.
The fire danger for that day is extremely high. There's a scale of low, medium, high, and extreme. Well, this was beyond extreme. A car driving off the road and spinning on a rock will start a fire.
The weather that day was, I think we had over 100-degree temperatures downtown. Extremely hot, extremely dry, just super dry conditions.
Dale Parks has finished clearing fire-prone brush from the Sporting Life ranch that he manages. It's one of many million-dollar spreads tucked in the wildland hills above the city.
It was a pretty hot day. It's a perfect area for a brush fire.
Horse trainer Jenny Hamilton also works at the ranch.
I looked up the canyon and saw smoke. What was going through my mind was like, oh wow, the wind coming down the canyon, that's going to be really bad.
It's a small fire that's spread outside a rural dump. Tom Franklin's crew has quickly pounced on it.
We were beginning to wrap up that incident, and another captain mentioned to me that he thought he had seen smoke up in the mountains. And I turned and looked and didn't see anything. And he mentioned it again, and I looked up in the mountain. There was probably about an acre or two that was burning.
Tom reports the fire, and his crew rushes to head it off.
You have a fire.
But it'll be a hell-bent race down winding dirt roads to face the rapidly spreading blaze.
It was pretty much in the middle of the mountain range and had nothing but fuel between it and the ocean. The winds were probably around 50 miles an hour. Extremely low humidity, very dry, dead brush. This thing was going. It was going right to the bottom of the mountains, and there was no way to really get at it.
What's pushing the wind is searing heat off the land, flowing down toward the cooler ocean. Since the winds appear late in the day, they are called sundowners. So dry, they suck all moisture away.
And as the fire moved on into the canyon, as it tries to move through a small space, the velocity increases, hence the winds pick up.
Quickest decisions, of course, that you've got to make is where is this thing going? Fire normally burns uphill, but in a sundowner condition, this thing's burning downhill very quickly.
What's burning is chaparral, vegetation that has evolved to survive for months without water, using oils and resins that are extremely flammable.
One kitchen match is 1 BTU. A cup of gasoline is 8,500. A pound of chaparral that we see out here is 8,500 to 10,000 BTUs. You have an unlimited supply of the most dynamic fuel in the world. And as soon as that ignition takes place, it's an explosion. It's an absolute explosion.
Joe, let's go. This is about as bad as it gets right here. You know we're gonna be in a tunnel here pretty soon? Yes, that's where we're gonna go.
The oxygen derived from the sundowner wind was like a supercharger on an automobile engine. Pretty soon it's almost nuclear in proportion. It's like a series of nuclear events like Hiroshima going off. You're liberating energy on that type of a scale.
By now, the hillside ranches are right in the path of the growing firestorm. Dick Conacher's neighbors make a daring attempt to rescue 15 horses trapped inside a barn.
Get back. Get back. Yes! You gotta get the horses out. Where are they? On the other side.
Finally, the horses are set free to fend for themselves. Now their rescuers must figure out how to get out of the rapidly burning hills to safety. But at the Sporting Life Ranch, there's not enough time. Jenny Hamilton and Dale Parks are trying to get the horses into the fireproofed barn with a sprinkler system.
My instinct was to, try and save the horses. What was going through my mind was like, oh wow, the wind coming down the canyons, that's going to be really bad.
It's just incredible, just awesome. It's, my estimate is probably 120-foot flames blowing towards us.
Dale had fire science and a whole lot more than I did, and so he kind of said, shut the barn doors.
We closed the barn doors and basically ran for our lives.
I just remember looking back and seeing, it was just, everything was so black, and it's just awful orange flames. Just the thought that it was coming faster than I could run, and there was nothing you could do to make it go away. I think this is it, I'm gonna die.
In the foothills below the ranches, a 40-foot wall of flame is speeding downhill at 250 feet per minute. Some people are fleeing. Others are desperately trying to save their homes.
Where is the fire department? Why don't they do something?
From that point, we realized that the real firefighting was going to be taking place down below in the neighborhoods. And we knew there would be one point where we'd have to cross the fire. I would guess our speed to be maybe as much as 30 miles an hour, and this thing just taking off in front of us, like someone passing you on the freeway.
As the truck enters the fire zone, day turns to night. The searing air tears at firefighters' lungs.
It's literally like hell. Everything's on fire. Everything around you's on fire. The embers get picked up by the wind, and wind just transports them as much as a half mile ahead of itself. And now you've got this thing that's just really moving out. When we finally got down to the bottom of the hill, there's fire everywhere. Roofs are on fire. We actually fought fire across people's front lawns. Everything was burning. The shrubs that line up the front walkways to the front doors, all kinds of ornamentals, truly unbelievable. The fire raced through the neighborhoods just as though it were burning through Chaparral. There was no difference. And there's something about the fire burning in your own neighborhood. We know our neighbors right around here, friends of ours, we're going to lose their homes. Things like that kind of just haunt you forever.
Oh, there goes the neighborhood.
In the hills, the flames are now moving so ferociously that in some positions, firefighters can only stand and watch.
I know that there are a lot of homes lost, and the only thing that's going to help us now is if God says, hey, the wind's going to stop.
When we return, the wall of flame heads right into the heart of the city. "50-mile-an-hour winds sweep a wildfire towards the city limits of Santa Barbara, California. Many homes are already in flames. 3 other large fires blaze in nearby counties. As a result, few helicopters are available to dump badly needed water. The wind has pushed the fire almost 4 miles downhill in 90 minutes. It was thought that the 6-lane freeway would create a fire break, but burning embers have leapt across it.
It's just chaos. People don't know what to do. I mean, the firemen and the police officers are doing the best they can, but it's just so frantic. I mean, it's so overwhelming.
It's a nightmare. You can't stop it up there. It's impossible. It's completely out of control. No hope.
Thousands of evacuees are stuck in freeway traffic.
Once the fire jumped the highway, I guess what I never imagined was a fire like this burning so intensely in the business district.
The blaze is still spreading up in the hills, and many people are trapped. Having done what they can for their horses, Jenny Hamilton and Dale Parks take cover in an adobe shed.
As we were running, there was, just big burning embers landing all around us and stuff. Remember, the wind was like swirling embers into the sides of the shed, and the hay on the bottom, on the ground was catching fire, and we were stamping out fire in there.
Inside the shelter, as this firestorm went through, just amazing. Just went from day to night.
And then it sort of, like it got lighter. And Dale realized that it probably meant that the fire had kind of gone over us. Dale said, come on, we gotta get the horses. And my first thought was, wow, how could the horse have lived through that?
Because it was built to resist fire, the barn survives the burnover. All but one horse is alive. But on the next ranch over, Jenny and Dale's neighbor has been killed fleeing the flames. Others are barely escaping with their lives. At twilight, the winds lessen, but sparks called firebrands still fall like incendiary snow. The fire has swept across 5,000 acres in less than 2 hours. Hundreds of individual spot fires make containment next to impossible. Among 335 rescuees are inmates from a prison that had to be evacuated from the fire zone.
I was really scared. Very scared. I think we got everybody under control. We do have officers here that are armed.
A local college football stadium serves as a temporary jail.
Okay, teen section. Wilman. Bowling.
Almost 2,000 firefighters have arrived to help, but the blazes are beyond control. From a distance, residents watch in stunned silence as part of their city goes up in flames.
It's amazing to see something travel that fast, and the only description that you can give is helplessness.
I feel helpless. I feel like there's nothing I can do. There's nothing anybody can do right now.
The sight is a very depressing one. And you feel to a large degree that there's nothing you can do, and in fact there isn't much that you can do. It's controlled by the wind.
The only thing I think you'll see worse than this is like a nuclear war where you've got fire that spreads through town as much as you've seen today. You can only save so much of it, and that's what we've done.
In little more than 2 hours since the fire started, over 400 people have become homeless. It's not until 3 a.m. that the winds finally die and the nightmare begins to abate.
At the time, we were shocked that the fire stopped when it did. And the only reason that it did stop was because the wind stopped. It was a wind-driven fire.
At sunrise, the extent of the destruction becomes painfully visible. An area 4 miles wide is left in ruins. 600 structures are destroyed.
Everything was just gone. I mean, it looked like just a war zone. Like, you know, you'd see houses with nothing but maybe a chimney and some twisted metal and just rubble, just black rubble everywhere. It was, you couldn't believe just the desolation, and it was just black. Everything was just this charred ruin.
We'll just have to start over again.
Driving through here, this entire area, everything was just black. If it wasn't metal or concrete, it burned. Many of us knew people who lost their homes, knew them well. And it's really tough when you're the firefighter who's supposed to be protecting their home. And they want to know why.
I don't know. I don't know. There were no trees, no bushes, nothing just started next to the house.
The fire has caused more than $200 million in damage. The vaunted good life on the Golden Coast has been reduced to smoking ash. It's determined that an arsonist started the fire. Since one woman died, the charge will be murder. The governor signs a proclamation.
And it's a $50,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and the conviction of the person or persons responsible for these Santa Barbara County fires.
No one was ever convicted for setting this third most destructive wildfire in California's history, and it won't be the last. Fires naturally sweep through the chaparral ecosystem every 25 years. The span of the human generation between these two firefighting veterans.
The chaparral will always grow back, always has. The seeds need fire to make them reproduce. It's not the exception, it's the rule.
And if we had that same weather event today, it could happen again, it will happen again. It's just a matter of when.
Coming up next, a flash fire in the Australian bush traps a family inside their home. It's been a burning season to awe even the most fire-weary veteran in the vast bushlands of New South Wales, Australia.
Yeah, get the hose out, Timmy. Put
that other bush going.
A spring drought has stretched into summer 1994. Bushfires have been breaking out across the state for over 2 weeks.
They're going to find out whether it's been burnt down in here or not.
Some appear to have been deliberately lit.
Will do.
In a withering heat wave, fire crews rush to stamp out blazes in thousands of acres of eucalyptus forest.
The wind direction only changes, it's swinging to the east.
But it's proving to be a losing battle. A thick pall of acrid smoke hangs over the seaside capital of Sydney. Up to 5,000 fire troops have massed on its outskirts. Fire is approaching from 3 sides. The biggest concern is that the wildland fires may move into habited areas. A wild bushfire that ripped into towns in Queensland killed 76 people a decade and a half before. Residents in the suburbs closest to the fires are growing nervous.
If you could remain in your homes and let the fire pass, which will be a short time, and then possibly put out spot fires after it has passed. I think that's all regions in the Windermere area.
We'd made a plan about staying in the house because this is what we'd been listening to during the week. You stay and then you put out the spot fires.
Philip Moore and his wife Barbara have evacuated their children.
The fires were quite close to us, but it seemed to be under control. We were worried, but we were not overly concerned.
Just to the south, the country's oldest national park is being eaten alive by flames. As fire crews struggle to contain the growing disaster in the bush, campers are being evacuated. Much of the region's wildlife is threatened.
In all, there was probably something like 700 or 800 fires burning in New South Wales. A tremendous strain on the fire control authorities, who were stretched to their utmost trying to provide enough men and enough resources to combat each of these separate fires.
Government fire expert Phil Cheney has broken off his vacation to monitor the growing crisis. The Australian bush is another place where drought-resistant foliage explosively ignites.
The Australian bush is dominated by eucalyptus trees. The compound in the eucalypt leaves is a eucalypt oil. It is very flammable and acts as a catalyst, so that when it's heated a little, the green leaves burn very severely.
I was physically and probably mentally at that point exhausted.
Martin Keeler's fire crew has been battling in the bush for a week in temperatures up to 100 degrees.
We've been on the go now for 8 days with very limited sleep.
Now another factor arrives to blow the situation out of control.
All of a sudden, the wind picked up.
As soon as the wind speed increased, all efforts of direct suppression of the fire were overwhelmed by the intensity that the wind whipped up in the fire itself.
The fire performed just like I hadn't seen it perform before. It just sort of went crazy. Nothing like I've seen before.
The hot winds blow to the coast from Australia's great inland desert. During the summer, weather systems push the hot winds southeast toward the continent's coastal eucalyptus forests and most populated areas.
When you get the combination of extreme fire weather with strong, dry, hot winds, then you have the full potential for a fire disaster.
The wind is sweeping the bushfire into Philip and Barbara's neighborhood.
At the moment we're going to be cutting a fire break. We're going to be protecting some houses.
I was actually up on the roof of the old house, just hazing it down. And while I was doing this, I was aware that the fire actually had got into the bush to the north of us, probably about 200, 300 yards away.
Those people got to move back because we're getting spot fires.
People in the neighborhood begin to flee.
All of a sudden, everything started just becoming too hard to control. It just wasn't behaving the way we were expecting it to. Until you're actually confronted with the sort of fire behaviour that was going on, it doesn't get etched into your mind, and it's certainly imprinted in your mind now.
Some people are now trapped within the neighborhood, including Philip and Barbara Moore.
By the time I got up to the street, the fire had moved to within about 150 yards of us, and the bush had literally exploded. And as I walked towards it, a wall of flame shot up out of the bush that would have been as high as 2 telegraph poles.
Philip remembers the advice to stay with the house. He grabs his wife and runs inside.
None of us can remember heat. None of us can remember the noise. Whether we simply clicked into a different level of survival, we really don't know.
The Moores take cover in the bathroom, which they've heard is safest because of non-flammable porcelain and tile.
We could see out through the window that the whole sky went orange. That's really the only way that we knew that the fire was there and around us. And as we were lying on the floor with the towels over us, we could hear the windows breaking in on the bedrooms on either side of us, and we knew then that the fire was actually in the house. In terms of survival, it was a question, do we go now or do we go later? And really that's what it comes down to.
The Moores realize they have to escape.
I can remember as we got out of the bathroom, I was surprised at how smoke-filled the house was.
I could see that there was smoke coming up through the floorboards. So we crawled to the front door, made a quick check that it was not too bad outside, and we ran. I looked back at our house and there was a column of fire coming out of our bedroom.
Fireman Keeler has battled the blaze to reach those still trapped in the neighborhood.
At this stage it was still extremely hot, very, very smoky. We walked along and I can remember looking at some of the houses on the left-hand side of the road that were, not only were they well alight, they'd basically reached the point where one of them had collapsed.
My husband kept looking out, and eventually he saw a fireman walking up the street wearing a gas mask. He called out to him, and the fireman was stunned to see us in the house still there.
The firestorm moves quickly on, leaving survivors completely shaken.
Fire Jesus, I've never seen that come through like that. I've never seen a fire like that come through. Unbelievable.
It was just a scene, it was just total destruction, the whole area. Not a leaf left on anything, not a scrap of green. Basically, just pockets of smoke rising out of ruins. It looked like a bomb had hit it, just totally destroyed it. There were people unaccounted for, but they couldn't determine whether they had been there or not, so the whole area was sealed off until everything had been extinguished, and they could then do basically a block-by-block search of the ruins.
More than 200 homes are lost this bushfire season in New South Wales. Many people have been injured. 2 firefighters and 2 residents have been killed. And as the suburbs continue to push into the bushland, the potential for future fire fatalities grows.
I think this is a a very difficult problem that fire authorities have to overcome to convince people that firstly the Australian bush is highly flammable, and if you decide to live in it, sooner or later you're going to get a high intensity fire.
Although Philip and Barbara are aware of that possibility, they've moved back to the edge of the bushland.
I suppose the main thing we learned is that when you're anywhere near a bushfire, you don't relax. Maybe the next time, I don't think I'll be hanging around to with any bravado to try and fight this one. I think I'll be in New Zealand at the first whiff of smoke.
Up next, a forest inferno sends firemen scrambling for their lives. Montana's Beartooth Wilderness is one of America's most remote vacation spots. Just north of crowded Yellowstone, this is where people come to really get away from it all.
When you walk into a forest during the summer and you get that fresh pine scent that everybody says they wish they could put in a bottle, well, that's aromatic compound, and that is flammable.
Fire expert Chuck Bushy is concerned about the unusually dry weather leading up to August 1996. 24 forest fires burn throughout the American West. The lodgepole pine here is ripe for fire.
As you walk through the forest itself, walking across the pine needles and the branches, you could just hear it crackling. It was almost scary to be able to walk through and hear those sounds and know how dry it was, and to know that there were people on the landscape that were camping and lighting fires.
Well, this stuff is so dry, Zach, it's ridiculous.
Must not have rained around here for quite a while.
But tonight, the biggest threat isn't man. It's nature.
This was just one storm that passed over the area, dropped a few bolts of lightning. They started 2 fires about half mile apart. And they were way up on the sides of the slope, so they were difficult to get to.
At first, the fires remain high on the rugged, steep slopes of an area called Shepherd Mountain. They can only be reached by helicopter. The strategy is to confine the fire to the steep topography. But after 10 days, both fires threaten a popular area called Rosebud Lake, an encampment created after the last great fire burned the trees away a century before.
Most of the fire now is around this ridge where the big smoke is.
Firefighters move in and set up staging areas for a long battle. And families begin pulling up stakes. One of the many firefighters trying to prepare for the worst is John Ruddock from a nearby town.
Our job in the initial 4 days was to clear brush around the cabins and set up hose lines that would go out in the lake and then supply water to fight fire around the houses.
I have a water supply set up at Berkshire. You want us to reload the staff? That's affirmative. Let's go ahead and protect Berkshire.
We could just see the amount of activity of more and more people showing up and the fire just growing in magnitude each day.
As the fire advances, people rush to wet their property. And firefighters set up backburns that they hope the blaze won't jump. Further up the mountain, crews are struggling up steep, narrow canyons to get ahead of the blaze. Veteran firefighter Dallas Howard leads a group from the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation. Native Americans have fought fires here in Custer National Forest and all over the American West for generations.
You gotta take it down there.
Everybody knows each other, in-laws, daughters, sons, and wives. I think we have some of the best firefighters in the world. We have approximately an 85% unemployment situation. These jobs buy clothes for your kids, buy cars, and pay a lot of your bills. Something I enjoyed. You work with a lot of great people. You're going to get to meet a lot of people from all over the country.
For 40 years, American forest fire crews have done a good job suppressing fire. Perhaps too good. The trees have gotten old and extremely flammable. The century-old forest has reached what's known as climax stage.
The lodgepole pine forest in particular gains in flammability as it ages. When conditions get dry enough and the weather conditions are proper and conducive to fire spread, then the forest can be extremely combustible and explosive.
The condition that turns this wildfire deadly is a sudden cold front that carries stiff winds.
All of a sudden the winds come in about 35, 40 miles an hour, and I looked up and I kept watching it.
Be advised, the Weather Service has predicted a high wind advisory.
The weather pattern overwhelmed all the other contributing factors and just blew that fire like a blowtorch right down the canyon.
Down to the lake. Go. Down to the lake.
This is a forest firefighter's nightmare, a condition called a blow-up.
Alright, I want you guys to get your people out of there and move back to Yamaha shop at this time.
Some troops speed a hasty retreat.
Yes, boy, it's coming down the canyon. Can't hear yet.
The fire just came over the ridge. The smoke clouds that it was putting out were 4 or 5 times as big as they'd been in the previous days.
Soon the fire is burning into cabins.
I was told I couldn't leave this area until I made sure everybody was out, and I had an elderly couple that were trying to load everything in their 2 vehicles. And I said, "You're leaving? You're leaving now? Get out."
John Ruddick has only fought house fires. This is overwhelming.
And I looked at this Forest Service guy who had 20 years of experience say, "I've never seen anything like this," and his hands were visibly just shaking. He was so shook. And at that point, I looked back also, and that's when, for the first time, fear entered my mind.
Up on the mountain, flames are dangerously close to Dallas and his crew. But the canyon's steep slopes make it impossible for them to get out. He orders the crew to retreat to a rockier, treeless area.
All right, move it out. Get into your safety zone. Get into your safety zone.
It was an awesome sight. See that fire going there, looked like over a half a mile, almost straight up. The gases, see balls of fire and the smoke bouncing around. You have to be there and see it and hear it and feel it and smell it. The pine and the fire burning and the smoke and the roar.
As the fire came down on the east side of the lake, it was just a matter of, this is overwhelming. There is no way we're going to stop it. Or you're looking at fire maybe 2 miles wide with flames 50, 60 feet above the treetops. It was just unbelievable, like a sea of water coming down a valley at you, except it was fire. We only have a few minutes to be out of here.
Time to go. Right now.
It was just kind of a helter-skelter, complete change of plans. We're not stopping this. We're not going to stay here and fighting it. We're out of here.
When we return, firefighters turn to their last resort to try to survive the flames. Fierce winds from a sudden cold front have blown a mountain forest fire in Montana into a raging inferno. Some members of Dallas Howard's fire crew are panicking.
I could tell these people are very nervous and excited and ready to run, so I told them, like, pull your fire shelter, don't deploy it, pull it out.
Government-issue fire shelters are designed to reflect heat, but can't protect from a total burnover. They are used in the kind of desperate situation that Dallas now hears on his radio.
We're deploying shelters. Repeat, deploying shelters. Fire's too close.
Not far away, other firefighters huddle under the thin shelters, while the forest burns perilously close. It's devouring 75 buildings at Rosebud Lake in a swirling inferno of wind-whipped flames. the flame front passes as quickly as it came. And firefighters move back in to control the burned areas. One of the men who used his shelter suffers second-degree burns. Memories of the blow-up are scorched in the minds of everyone who survived it.
It just was overwhelming to watch nature take control and say, this is what's going to happen, and you are meaningless to this situation.
Just Mother Nature came in with that wind, and the situation explosive, and then went up. Unfortunately, nobody got killed.
Firefighters have been killed in the sudden whirlwind of a blow-up. One of the worst was in a Colorado canyon on a mountain called Storm King.
I was getting ready for work, and I heard a news flash, essentially stating that a number of firefighters were killed on a mountain in Colorado, and I had a bad feeling.
Jim Roth's brother was one of 14 firefighters who lost their lives in 1994 when the Storm King wildfire blew out of control.
Many of them, including my brother Roger, didn't realize that the fire was overtaking them until it was too late.
When Jim Roth learned his brother died in a fire shelter, he wanted to help improve upon the protection. Jim is an aerospace engineer. He began researching technology from NASA's Space Reentry program to look for materials and a design that would reflect heat better and keep the air inside shelters from reaching lung-scorching temperatures.
We tried to design this fire shelter to survive a fire typical of that on the South Canyon fire in Colorado. It can handle temperatures in excess of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for over 5 minutes.
For a real trial by fire, Jim takes his prototype out into a remote forest where a controlled burn is planned. He sets the shelter made of alternating layers of fiberglass and reflective foil inside the fire line. Then he attaches instruments that will measure the intensity of the heat. He places a video camera in a fire-resistant box to document what happens. Finally, the forest is ignited. You are about to experience a never-before-seen view of the heart of a raging wildfire.
The fire moves through the tops of the trees, and then the smoldering fuel comes down from the top of the trees like pine needles and branches, hits the forest floor, and then begins spot fires. And this is what you see in the video before the wall of flame actually hits the fire shelter. The first time I saw the videotape from inside the fire, I was astonished. I was really amazed at the ferocity and the quickness that the fire moves through the area. No one has ever seen this and lived to tell about it. This is what you would typically see if you were inside of a fire shelter.
Jim's prototype has remained intact in temperatures reaching nearly 2,000 degrees. This is what happens to a standard issue shelter in a chaparral fire.
I feel that when a firefighter really has no other decision but to pull out his fire shelter and get into it, he's got the best fire shelter that we can provide.
The Forest Service has also conducted tests on how their fire shelters work, finding they are actually safer places to be than fire trucks when a firestorm flashes over because of toxic gas from melting plastic and superheated metal. Jim hopes his insulating material can also be used as curtains to make a truck cab more fireproof when overrun by wildfire. He will continue to refine his design until it's light enough for firefighters to pack it in on long hikes. But this engineer who has felt fire's tragic effects feels the real way to save lives is to accept that sometimes wildland fires are too dangerous to fight.
I'm really at a paradox. I wish that we would never have firefighters working so closely to a fire, putting themselves at so much risk that they even need a fire shelter.
That wish is not likely to come true. Around the world, populations are spreading out into wilderness like demographic wildfire, making tragedy more inevitable than ever.
You can get very large and destructive bushfires which will burn property and have the capacity to kill people. I think this is a feature which is becoming more common all around the world.
Another fire like this could easily happen in this area. It just takes the right year and the right conditions as far as the weather's concerned, and easily happen again.
We live in fire country. It's burned before. It's going to burn again. It will happen again. It's just a matter of when.
Get started.